Okay, good morning. So first item is a member of the roll call. So Chief Scott Howland.
Present.
Brenda Brunner.
Present.
Leanne Magoski.
Here.
And Ann Harb.
Here.
Sheriff Ingrid Braun, absent. Sheriff Corey Honey on the phone.
I'm present by conference call.
Okay, good morning, Sheriff. Chief Hatfield. Present. Chris Herron.
Here.
Chief John Peters. And Chief Craig Carter. Present. We have a quorum. First order of business is approval of the minutes, and because we do have one member on the phone, each one will be via roll call vote. The first minutes to be considered are from Thursday, August 30th, 2018. This was a meeting held at Los Alamitos. Are there any corrections? Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We'll go through a roll call. Chief Howland,
Yes.
Brenda Brunner,
Yes.
Leanne Magoski,
Yes.
and Ann Harb.
Yes.
Sheriff Honey,
I was not present, so I have to abstain.
abstain. Chief Hadfield,
Yes.
Chief Chris Herron,
Yes.
and Chief Carter,
I was not present.
abstain. Second minutes is from October 17th, Wednesday, October 17th here in this building. Do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
Chris Herron, second.
Okay, and please let the record note that that Sheriff Ingrid Braun has arrived and is present. So roll call vote on the approval of the minutes from October 17th. Chief Howland,
Yes.
Brenda Brunner,
Yes.
Leanne Magoski,
Yes.
and Ann Harb.
Yes.
Sheriff Braun,
Yes.
Sheriff Honey,
Yes.
Chief Hadfield.
Absent, abstain.
Okay, Chris Herron,
Yes.
and Chief Carter. Okay, we have 2 abstentions. And last set of minutes is from Tuesday, December 11th, for another meeting here in this building. Do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Again, roll call. Chief Howland,
Yes.
Brenda Brunner,
Yes.
Leanne Magoski,
Yes.
and Ann Harb.
Absent, abstain.
Sheriff Braun,
Yes.
Sheriff Honey,
I believe the campfire precluded me from coming, so I have to abstain.
okay, Sheriff Honey abstains. Chief Hadfield,
Yes.
Chris Herron,
Yes.
and Chief Carter.
Yes.
Okay, we have approved. Next order of business is a closed session to review and discuss the fourth quarter California 911 outages pursuant to Government Code Section 11126E. So we are in closed session. Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order. There is nothing to report out from the executive or from the closed session. There was no decisions made. So move on to item number 4, legislative update from Reggie Salvador. Reggie?
Good morning, folks. So I'm just going to talk about a couple of bills that were introduced on both the state and federal level. So starting off with AB 162 by Assemblymember Kiley, which prohibits the CPUC from taxing any service that the FCC has determined to be an information service, which will and that's to fund the Universal Service Fund. Another bill is AB 183 by Assemblymember Wood, which requires the CPUC to collect and report information from telco providers on efforts and resources used to restore outages caused by emergencies or disasters. Another one is AB 569 by Assemblymember Fong, which makes it a crime to falsely report an active shooter to law enforcement or other specified entities, and also that the reporter would be liable for costs of the emergency response. And specific to that is that it also adds 911 operators and employees of law enforcement agencies to the list of persons that it would be a crime to make a false report to. So it adds 911 dispatchers to that. Also, SB 208 by Assemblymember Hueso, which requires telecommunication service providers to implement protocols for caller identification on calls carried over an IP-based network. And finally, a budget trailer bill to update the fee structure for the Setna Fund, which will fund the upgrades to the 911 system, especially in transitioning to next-gen 911. On the federal side, there's HR 292 by Congressman Curtis, which would streamline the broadband permitting process by allowing states and tribes to have their permitting streamlined within the federal lands or tribal lands. And finally, S-273 by Senator Roberts, which will require telecommunication service providers to share users' device locations with law enforcement officers and PSAPs to respond to a call for assistance or life-threatening emergency. So that is the list of bills that we're currently tracking in relation to the 911 system. If there are any questions, I could please answer them.
Questions from the board? Questions from the audience or public? Okay, moving on to the next item.
Thanks.
Is the FirstNet report. So the three things to report here. One is the California Department of Technology is currently in the process of negotiating a public safety broadband service contract under what they call CalNet Contract 19.2. Those negotiations are ongoing. There, as far as the 911 branch meeting with AT&T, we continue to meet with them to discuss coverage concerns. And also, recently, we had a meeting with them with AT&T to discuss a liaison that would actually respond to the State Operations Center and assist with the ESF2 function to ensure public safety broadband for the first responders. Lastly, the next California board meeting has not been scheduled yet. We had one scheduled, but we found out it was a state holiday on April 1st, so we'll have to reschedule that one. So any questions from the board or any questions from the public? Okay, next up is a report from Mr. Courier.
All right, so on the graphic here is the briefing topic. So if there's additional questions you have that I don't cover, feel free to interrupt me. And certainly as I'm going through, if you have questions, let me know. The purpose of this is to give you an idea of what we are doing at the program level in the 911 branch, and we want to make sure that you have the opportunity to weigh in and advise as necessary as we're working on each of these initiatives. So the first graphic is our updated call stats for 2018. So we have some really good news here. The total number of calls is a little over 27 million. You may remember from last year our total call count was a little over 28 million. So if you're wondering why we went down by about 1 million calls, the wireless reroute project that we've been working on for a number of years, this is the fruit of those efforts. So Chief Howland, your centers are receiving a significantly lower number of calls as a result of this, and really that work is the cooperation between your staff at CHP, obviously Cal OES, and the county coordinators to make sure that when you call from a wireless device, we make our best attempt to route that to the correct location the very first time.
And Budge, I just want to thank your staff and also each of the PSAPs, because I know, routing is a big effort, and it's really a collaborative effort, and I think it's really a team effort that ultimately, as you said, it's how do we make sure the call gets to the right spot with the minimum transfers, which saves seconds and saves lives. So I think it's got to make sure everybody gets credit for the hard work that has happened, because it's a massive project.
It really is. So we'll have stats on that again next quarter, because it's a quarterly process we do. Obviously, first quarter this year is not available yet. We're still in the middle of it. But that's the big takeaway of this. The rest of the numbers we saw, wireless went up by about 1%. Wireline is down 3%. It's pretty significant if you think about that. Voice over IP is holding steady at about 4%. And then other, which is telematics and everything that doesn't have a clear definition in one of those other buckets, that's up about 2%. Overall text messages, and I've got this on another graphic, we're covering about 74% of the population of California is either currently accepting text or in the process of deploying. That number went up about 10,000 from the previous year, so it's 28,000 text messages in 2018. When you compare it to 27 million calls, it's a very small percentage, but we are seeing an uptick there. And then the stat we continue to discuss is wireless is the bulk of the calls, but when you look at the percentage of how the fee is currently assessed, wireline is paying the lion's share of what goes into Setna, and that's essentially the problem that we have with the current funding model. So any questions on the stats? All right, next graphic, we're going to talk about our fiscal and operational review. In 2018, our total was 112. Based on the records we keep, that's the highest number we've done in any single year. So that's where we actually meet face-to-face, about a 4-hour meeting, sometimes longer, with the PSAP and go through their call handling equipment, their call handling equipment replacement, as well as all the other operational and 911 branch initiatives that exist out there. So far this year, we've done 14, and I know some of my staff is out in the field today, so that number is actually bigger than 14, and we're continuing to do that. Again, the ask here is if you know of a PSAP that we have not visited recently, or even if we have visited recently and you want us to come back, then let us know, and we will come out and meet with you. All right.
Just to comment on that, Budge, speaking as a PSAP manager, that document that is also given at that meeting is very helpful. Recently going to a new agency, I was able to find that document and get a lot of information. So it's not just about that 3 or 4 hour meeting, it's you actually leave the PSAP with information that is very usable, so thank you.
Yeah, but that's some good feedback. We're also working with a vendor to automate that document and make it available electronically. So that's something that we think is really important, to get that data, easily accessible. So that's some good feedback. So I'll take that back to the team. This graphic tracks the number of customer premise equipment or call handling equipment that we've accepted and installed by year. Last year, there were 52 that were installed and accepted. So far this year, we've had 1, and we expect this number to grow. We average, you can see, other than that 1 year where we had 94, we average about between 50 and 60 a year is what the count is. We have some very large PSAPs that are going to be bringing CPE equipment on year in the next 4 to 5 months, and so these stats are going to be, they'll go up by 1 number, but it ends up being a huge agency like LAPD. So we count them all the same in this statistic here. This gives you a sense of what we're doing for CPE install. This graphic is an update of our text to 911. What we've tried to do on this graphic is highlight the changes. So we wanted to keep the historical data in there so you could see who's either in process or already deployed for text to 911. But anywhere you see a plus in there, that's the change from the last time that we briefed you out. So 2 additional in Alameda County, 1 additional in Humboldt County, 2 additional in Marin County. 2 additional in San Diego County, another one in Ventura County, and 5 more for CAL FIRE have started the process. In addition, Orange County had their public meeting notice where they announced countywide they were ready to, they were fully deployed for text to 911. That's a meeting, that's a notice that was given. And you see roughly 3/4 of California's population is covered in the PSAPs that you see here on this graphic.
What do you consider deployed or partially deployed?
So the column that's listed that is both. So if you've either contacted us and then submitted to the FCC to be able to accept text, or you're fully deployed, you show up in that column. The reason why we do it that way is because until the public notice is made, we don't want to be the ones to say which counties are and are not accepting text. The county likes that flexibility. So we're trying to find a way in these stats to not be the one who's doing the public notice.
I'm just looking at San Diego and wondering who these 5 PSAPs plus 2 are.
Well, it's 5
Deployed or
total.
deployed.
It's 5 total. We can get you those if you want to know who exactly they are. I don't have that at my fingertips, but I can give you the names of those.
Okay.
Okay, we'll follow up.
I think it's important to point out that one of these stats in here suggests that a county may be 100% deployed. That means that they're in the process. That by no means that anyone in that county has actually taken a live text call yet. And I think that's the point that
Exactly.
Hanan is trying to make.
Well, I'm the one in charge of the text in San Diego, and we haven't deployed anybody. We've done network testing of 1 PSAP.
All right, we'll get you the list of who those 5 are.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, the next graphic, this is just a kind of a summary of text all on one slide. The total count was on that previous slide, 28,000 for 2018. It's a very low volume in the center. About 74% of the population is covered. And we are still having this transfer issue. So we discussed this at the last advisory board meeting. If you and your secondary PSAP are using different text control centers, you cannot transfer one to the other. Okay? Most counties, this does not apply. Most counties all deploy the same TCC, statewide or countywide, and so this is not a problem. We do know that in Butte County, there's a potential for this to be a problem because they're mixed in that county. We've been working with the text control centers to solve this, and I'm going to talk about this in a minute, but we've also recently released an RFP to address this problem through a contract process with technical requirements that will solve this long term. All right, any questions on text? All right, the next update is to give you a sense of where we are with NextGen 911. If you're tracking this graphic, those 2 puzzle pieces on the bottom, funding and procurement, they're moving closer to where they need to be. If you compare to where we were a couple months ago, I tried to actually move them off the slide because we were that far away. So we are seeing some progress here, and I'm going to talk through that in the next couple of slides to let you know the progress we're making. So this graphic was put in here in the event that we were unsuccessful to release our RFP on last Friday. We were able to release it. So this graphic says that we'll give you data once it's been released, and it has. So here's what we did last Friday. We've been working with the Department of Technology to release an RFP. This RFP is all-inclusive for NextGen 911 services. Through the same contract vehicle, we'll be able to select a prime vendor and regional vendors for each of the regions. So we don't have to go out to multiple contracting processes to do this. I've listed on here the big bullets of what each of those vendors are responsible for. Obviously, the prime, each of them has NextGen 911 core services that they're providing based on the NENA I3 standard. The prime is going to be aggregating OSP, originating service provider traffic, for all of the small LECs and the voice over IP providers and all those. And then they're going to be doing system monitoring. This next bullet is important, interface standards. They will essentially be the gatekeeper for every single interface so that we have The NENA I3 standard provides the baseline that this is based on, but there's always details. You know, you may have put this bit in this header in this way in your solution, which is in alignment with the standard. Somebody else may have done it slightly different. So that's one of the big roles that the prime vendor will do. They'll be the text to 911 provider for the state. And this next one, we've asked them to develop a next-gen 911 alert and warning system statewide. What we've seen, there are many entities out there who have purchased their own solutions, and sometimes they're maintained, sometimes they're in alignment with what everyone else is doing, sometimes they're not. The goal here would be to have alert and warning interface with IPAWS, which is the federal alert and warning system, to include WIA, the wireless emergency alerts, as well as the California Earthquake Early Warning Alert and Warning Program, and all of the other alert and warning systems that are out there. So some of the companies you may have heard of are things like Everbridge or Reverse 911 or Code Red or Nixle or any number of those. And then we put the requirements in here that they need to be able to take whatever the county or city is using today and be able to pull that data in and use it in this statewide system. The reason why we've done this is to provide a common technology platform for alert and warning. We've worked really hard with the FCC to make sure that this is not considered a diversion of 911 funds, and it's not. And we've also talked with the FEMA IPAWS director to make sure this is in alignment with the vision that they have for federally for IPAWS, which is the Federal Alert and Warning System. So more word to follow as we meet with vendors and get their feedback, and the technical requirements are out there. So if you have one of these systems, we would encourage you to read through those technical requirements and give us feedback. The way we release this RFP, it's what we call a pre-solicitation. So it's the full RFP, everything is in there, and then it's released as a pre-solicitation, and then we sit down and have confidential meetings with potential bidders who want to discuss the details, and then we have the opportunity to make updates and repost the solicitation once it becomes final. So you basically have about 30 days to get back to us with your feedback. Anything you see anywhere in this RFP, feel free to reach directly out to us, and we can take your comments and feedback. The other thing this establishes is the regional vendor. This will give us the opportunity to select the prime and then the region, and you can see the big things for the region. Obviously, they're a core service provider, they're doing aggregation, and they're complying with those interface standards that are developed by the prime, and system monitoring is a big piece of this as well. So before I go to the dates, I want to see if there's any feedback or questions on this graphic.
So on the prime has text to 911. If the prime goes down, will there be no text to 911? Or will the regional
So
pick that up?
we've put requirements on the technical requirements that if you can't deliver something to the PSAP, then you, the prime, need to pass that to the region to deliver it to PSAP. So, and that's any 911 traffic. So the technical details of that, we put a functional requirement in, so I couldn't say it's going to be this, this, and this to happen, but that functional requirement is there. And vice versa. If a 911 call or data is coming into a region and region can't connect to PSAP, it falls over to prime, and prime delivers that to the PSAP. So they back one another up.
So then what is the on that? Why is text to 911 included in the prime but not in the region?
The way text to 911 is done is it's much easier to have a single statewide solution that connects to every PSAP. And then obviously you've got dual redundancy in rack, dual data centers managing the service. So you're already at 5 nines reliability, which is better than what we get today, in the solution. And then we've built in that extra layer where if your text service is up and running and for some reason you, the prime, can't reach the PSAP, you can send that down to a region and the region would deliver it. So all of that is built in there in layered redundancy. That's a great question. Okay. All right, the next graphic just gives you a sense of the timeline. We released the pre-solicitation on February 15th. We'll be meeting with Potential bidders, anyone who wants to have a conversation, March 19th through the 21st. And we'll release the final version of this on March 29th. And then there's some details in there, last day to submit a bid or intend to bid, and then they submit their proposals in mid-May. Because this is going to be a tariff service, we will finish our technical evaluation, and then they will submit their tariffs to the PUC. The reason for that is we don't want to have view of pricing before we do complete our technical review, and that's why that timeline's in there. Then they turn in their cost worksheets to us. That 20 days between June 7th and June 27th is the 20-day protest period that exists in the PUC process. And then we intend to make an intent to award in July for the prime, and then we'll make the notice of intent to award to the regions in August. Obviously, in order to begin the next-gen 911 services, we need a funding model. And so the trailer bill language and the trailer bill and redoing the SETNA model is an important process of this. But we can get all the way through the procurement process, and we have written the procurement in such a way that if the funding is not there, we still have the ability to do an intent to award so that the procurement process is not held up by a secondary legislative process. All right, seeing no further questions there. This graphic, we've talked through these bullet points many, many times, but I wanted to continue to put them in front of the board in case people ask you, why is NextGen so important? What's the big deal about NextGen 911? I'm going to leave it to you. We've gone through these point by point many times. The one thing I will point out on this slide is this increased location accuracy for wireless calls. That second bullet there. Our current wireless project, as you see, we've reduced the number of 911 calls in California by about 1 million because of those efforts. So the way that project works is if you imagine a cell sector, a big pie shape goes out like this. The length of that pie shape is anywhere from, say, 300 meters to several miles, depending on whether it's urban or out in the rural areas. That entire sector needs to go to one 911 center. That's the limitation of the current network. You have to send that entire sector to one and only one PSAP. With NextGen, if that pie shape is crossing, say, a police department, a sheriff, and highway patrol, today we look at transfer rates, and if it's greater than 20%, we take a look at where it should go, and then we route it to the best one, which means 20% errors is acceptable. Because if it's less than 20%, we say it's routed to the right place. With NextGen, I can route based on the location of the device and send every single call to the correct place without that limitation of the entire sector going one place. So that's a really important thing to consider with location accuracy and wireless calls, and something that our current location accuracy project that we're going to discuss in a minute is going to give us some data to help support. So any questions on that or anything else on this graphic? All right, this is the same graphic we've used the last time we met. I wanted to keep this in your binders so you've got it at your fingertips. This shows kind of a bird's eye view of from the perspective of the PSAP, what does NextGen 911 look like? And how is it connected into the PSAP? On the left-hand side of this graphic, you've got the originating service providers, and then on the far right, you've got the PSAP. We've updated the next graphic to show our new timeline based on the RFP that was just released. Pending funding approval, these are realistic dates for the rollout of NextGen 911 statewide. Our goal remains the same, to have the selective routers decommissioned by 2022. We were able to work with Department of Technology on this current procurement and address some of the timeline adjustments that were necessary because we didn't get our funding, and that's why we put this all into a single procurement package. It ended up saving us probably 6 to 12 months of procurement process by doing it that way. It makes it much harder on us and on the Department of Technology to manage the selection of those vendors. But once we get through that selection process, the timeline is accelerated because we've got simultaneous build-outs going throughout the state. All right, any questions on that? Our Setna update. So Reggie mentioned this at a high level. I'll put these talking points in front of you. The trailer bill is going to be posted to the Department of Finance website. As soon as it is posted, we will send that link out to the board. It is not there now. We check it often. Once we see that, we'll let you know. The moment that the trailer bill is there, we can also send out to you talking points based on the contents of that trailer bill. We have to wait until all that data is made public before we can share it, obviously, with the board. In the governor's budget, this is public information. There was $10 million for this fiscal year and $50 million for next fiscal year. The funding that was allocated for this fiscal year helps us to expedite the process of that microwave network. So I'm going to go back 2 graphics and show you what I'm talking about there. So that's this top portion up there where you see CapsNet microwave backhaul. That's that project that we're talking about there, which builds and increased the resiliency into the PSAP over a network that we manage that doesn't go down when the backhaul burns up. And then the $50 million for the next fiscal year helps us to offset the continued decline in revenue until the new funding model kicks in. And that's the vision that's included in the current governor's budget. More word to follow on this, and I wish we had, could have a long dialogue today, but we don't have the public data available to share yet. Go ahead, Chris.
Since we only meet quarterly, hopefully this group isn't tired of me saying this, but I just want to remind each of us as representatives of associations with an interest in 911. So when we get this trailer bill information from the state, it is going to be imperative that we do a much better job this year of coming together, getting our associations to come out publicly supporting it, because we know we didn't meet the target last year. And I'll share one new tidbit, which was within the week of the governor's speech on day 2, where he mentioned the funding for 911. I know at least locally, the San Diego Union Tribune had an editorial coming out against the what they were calling a new tax or a new fee. Obviously, they had not done research to support that. They just, jumped on it. And so that, to me, that told me, oh boy, there's already going to be groups or people against this without even knowing. So it's incumbent upon all of us to make sure that the message gets out there. And Budge and his team have committed to giving us that nice one-pager that we can share with our local Congress folks. So
It
we
might
need
be
to do
2
that.
pages.
Okay.
There's a lot of data.
Well, I'll take it and use smaller font and make it 1 page, because 1-pagers are really good when you're dealing with,
You could front back it, Chris, if
So,
that works
all right.
for you.
But anyway, so we'll talk about this every meeting, I know, but just start talking about that internally and with your associations. Chuck Berdan's in the audience. We're still doing the monthly coalition conference calls where we're talking about legislation. So we have all the pieces in play. We just need to make sure we all follow through.
Budge, maybe the suggestion too on the 50 million is that only if the funding is approved through the next budget process, and again, it's a loan. So this is not, I don't want people to see that and go, well, we got $50 million. Actually, we're pretty good. We don't need to worry about any of the setting of funding. So maybe an explanation on that.
Yeah, so we can get you some more data on that. This is obviously tied to the governor's budget, so even the $50 million is dependent on the passing of the budget, which doesn't happen until June. And so those details we can share in June when it's passed. But that's a good point. It's not guaranteed. It's in the budget and is tied to all kinds of other initiatives that need to be considered before we can tell you, hey, we've got this. Just big numbers from our fund condition statement, which I don't have a copy of. I should have had it in the briefing slides. Our average budget today is about $100 million. That's just about what we spend on average each year. Our revenue coming in right now is about $60 million. So even if you add in that 50, I still don't have what I need to build out next gen. That's just enough to maintain legacy. So really that $50 million is just like we've described it. It'll partially offset the continued revenue declines as we go into the next fiscal year, but what we really need is a sustainable funding model to do what we're trying to do. Yep. Okay, so more word to follow, and as soon as we hear any updates on this, we will certainly push it out to the board. At that point, it's a public document, so we're able to do that. This 911 Goes to Sacramento event, we've talked about this many times. It's turning out to be much more complicated to coordinate this than you could ever imagine. So obviously, we at the 911 program, we cannot sponsor this event. We can't pay for it. We can't, that's not within the spending authority that we have for CETNA. So we have to look to association partners and vendor partners. We are in an active procurement, which makes it very difficult for me to partner with vendors who could potentially bid on a procurement. So we have to be careful with that. So we're trying to find an association or someone that would like to champion this event so that we, the 911 branch, are completely removed from it. Obviously, this is an important effort to get word out and to engage with the legislature. And so we think we may have a path forward. And it's looking like instead of April, it'll be May, just because of the timeline. But all of the goals and opportunities here remain the same. I can tell you this, myself and Pat and Paul Troxel just returned from the 911 Goes to Washington event, which is a structured event where all the 911 administrators, folks like me from around the nation, there were, I think, 36 different states there. We had an event similar to this, had the opportunity to engage with legislators. And at the federal level, there are several federal initiatives that are moving forward as a direct result of those efforts. So these events are extremely effective to help get the word out. If this event doesn't happen, you should make it your personal goal to get legislators into your PSAPs and help them understand what it is you do. It's going to be much harder for them to say no when they don't understand the critical lifeline that's provided through 911. And we all know in this room, every single disaster and emergency starts with a 911 call. So having a state-of-the-art system that's able to provide the data that's needed to save lives is at the forefront. And that's really what the focus of this event's about. So more word to follow on this, and it's quite a complicated piece to put together. So any questions or comments? All right, these are a couple of other projects. I know it's a long brief this morning, but we're doing a couple of initiatives. We mentioned these last time, but now we've got a little bit more granularity on this. The first is location accuracy. So both Google and Apple have made their device-based location information available. And we would like to find a way to put that into every 911 center in the state. So we worked with a contracting process. It's called the Software License Program. And we used AT&T as a reseller to select Rapid Deploy. That's a software solution that will provide supplemental location data in the 911 center. So you're still going to get your normal Annie feed that would come into your CPE, into your customer premise equipment. And yes, we know this is an additional screen, an additional interface. That's a problem. But the challenge is the location data that's available from Google and Apple that's being integrated through a clearinghouse. Your current 80 to 90% of the PSAPs in California, your current CPE or CAD cannot accept that data. So we would love to just be able to take that data and integrate it right into what you've already got in your center. But most of your centers don't have upgraded enough equipment to be able to interface with this new delivery. So the Rapid Deploy software will be made available at no cost to the PSAP. It'll provide that supplemental location data based on a web interface. We're also going to interface it on the same screen and be able to provide your Annie information. And this is in real time. You don't have to query. It's a real-time data feed, and you'll have both displayed there. We'll work with your IT department to either Cal OES will provide that IP connection, or we'll work with whatever you've got in your 911 center to get that connection in there. We've got a deployment underway for 4 PSAPs, Folsom PD, Sonoma County, Napa PD, and Palo Alto. They are all being installed this week. So our goal is to get data from those 4, and then when we're at NENA in the second week of March, we'll present that data. We know that word of mouth is the most important thing because we're really good at introducing technology. We're not the operational people. You are. So we want to have a conversation to make sure we don't negatively impact the operations in the PSAP, and it's through these 4 911 centers that we're going to do that. And then the goal would be to start rolling this out in waves throughout the rest of the state with the goal of being fully deployed by September of 2019. We, the 911 branch, are also going to be looking at the data to compare the accuracy of device-based location data with what's coming in through Alley, because that's really important for us. So we know this is not end state, it's not what we really want to do, but in the absence of upgraded CPE or upgraded CAD and a next-gen 911 system, is the best statewide solution that we can offer. So a lot more word to follow on this, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
But quick question, do you know if anybody's working on integration to either CPV or CAD? Because it seems like, we're not unique in California, the only folks, potentially going to be using this. And it seems like, how can we make sure our callers are focused on the call as opposed to looking at another screen to track down information?
Right, so there are some CPE and CAD vendors today that have that full integration ready to go. There are a few manufacturers out there that are working on that. Unfortunately, most of our equipment in California is older and isn't able to do that. So yes, some states and counties, in other parts of the nation have a fully integrated solution. If there's a PSAP in California that has the capability, we'll just fully integrate. It's done, all right? But that's probably only 10 to 15% of the total ones out there. We didn't want to provide a solution to only those 10 to 15%. We wanted to make something available statewide. The other thing we've done is we've taken a close look at our current CPE contract. It's on an equipment replacement cycle, so essentially once you buy CPE, you got to wait 5 years to get any upgrades or changes for the most, especially significant upgrades, unless we pay out of pocket to do that upgrade earlier. So we've started to meet with CPE vendors to move us into this kind of next generation of CPE equipment. And it's probably not going to be customer premise equipment. It'll be more like call handling equipment, where you've got a data center solution, a true IP environment, and maybe a cloud-based interface, so that you now are paying as a service that's constantly upgraded. So we met with vendors to have that conversation because we see this as a limitation to rolling out innovation. And so we're starting to have those conversations. So once we get through this next-gen RFP, that's the next one we're going to crack open and take a look at. What does call handling equipment look like in this true IP environment? And so as we start to have those conversations, if there's any PSAPs out there that want to join with us in those conversations, let us know, because we agree, Chief, that we need to get past this kind of legacy equipment limitation. Absolutely.
I had a question. Was Rapid Deploy the only vendor that could support the call handling and the location accuracy, or were there other vendors considered?
So that's a good question. The thing that we considered at the state level was speed to deployment. We did not want to enter into, typically a procurement for us takes about 18 months from when we start. So we looked for an existing software contract that was competitively bid, that had the solution on it that we needed to roll out. That was the SLP program. And so the way that SLP works is the software publisher, Rapid Deploy, is on contract. And then they have resellers that are competitively bid and managed through the Department of General Services. Then when we need that software, we reach out, get 3 bids, select the lowest bidder, and you're off to the races. But it's truly just a software. There's no services, there's no, it's just simply software that you're getting. So there's some restrictions on using that program, but that's why we went that route. We also see this as an interim step. Obviously, this isn't long-term solution. Long-term solution is fully integrate this into a next-gen 911 environment and be able to deliver that data all the way into your CPE on the same screen in the 911 center. So if we waited for that, then it would be 2 years or 3 years before we got there. So we looked at trying to find an existing contract that was out there that had all those needs all in one place, they were the ones that were positioned to do that. But that's a great question.
How much is this costing the state?
So the contract is somewhere around, I think it's $3 million a year for 2 years, I think is what the contract value is. And it's a public contract, so we can make that available to you. And we priced that out compared to some of the other 911 centers that were looking for a similar solution, but yet they were going direct to other vendors. So the cost savings here, when you deploy it statewide is unbelievable. Plus, we're getting some extra features and functions that we at the state 911 program need in order to validate this device-based location.
I think I'll speak on this topic in terms of the LRPC report because the things sort of blend, so rather than wait. But I just wanted to share, we had a good, healthy discussion about this topic yesterday during the LRPC meeting, which, is obviously made up of our operations folks. So Ryan took a lot of feedback for the state to consider as this moves forward. I think one of the things that I certainly felt like at the end of it was we didn't, or I personally, and I think Joe actually agreed, we didn't want to stop the state. We just want them to consider all these things as these pilots are being done here. And so it sounds like we'll get a good update at NENA. We're also working to schedule the next LRPC meeting for late March, early April, so that we can, again, be included in the discussion on this project and be able to give the state feedback from an operational perspective, because there certainly are a lot of questions. Questions that will need to be answered eventually, but not questions that we felt like, should stop the project from moving forward. And just one other note on it, I think this topic of location accuracy has been discussed at all of the next-gen working groups. And we had reports yesterday from 3 of the groups were represented, Northern, Central, and LA. Actually, we're all here and spoke. But it's a hot topic in the PSAP community, so I think everyone's excited to see the state, at least looking into what can we do today as we all kind of wait for next gen to come along.
Right, and the contract is written such that, obviously, you as a PSAP have a choice. You don't have to have this data. We want to gather the information so we can compare device-based location with Annie Alley. That's really important for one of our initiatives. But you don't have to display it if you don't want. And if this ends up being a problem, either operationally or from a data perspective, it's basically a month-to-month contract. We can stop it at any time. So all of those are built into the contract process. So we have a lot of flexibility with this solution. And if it doesn't work out well for us, then we can try something else. We really feel that from the feedback we've gotten from the PSAP community, location data is critical. 50% of the time today, call arrives in a 911 center and you do not have location data. And so we're trying to do everything we can to solve that problem sooner rather than later. Yeah, and today, there's no best solution. There's just going to be a bunch of choices and options and pros and cons of each one. The best solution is a fully deployed next-gen 911 network with CPE that can totally integrate with a NENA i3 solution. That's end state, but unfortunately, we're probably 2 to 3 years away from that.
Just a comment, just to really reiterate the operational concern of we only need this information when the caller cannot tell us where they're at. There are products out there that we all have been using, and the problem is it's one more login. It's one more thing we have to do. And so while it is exciting to see a quick response by the state to support all of the PSAPs, this is, again, another login.
Yep. We'll get it.
It's not fully integrated, so I'm cautious with the word integrated, because when that information is presented, the dispatcher is still going to have to type that in. It's not integrated into any of the systems. And so I think we were all focused on next generation 911 is going to solve this for us in a couple of years. And from my perspective, this all happening in the last couple months was a big surprise, not to really understand and know that there was going to be this pilot project so quickly. And so I think I would like to hear more as both an advisory board member and an LRPC member to be able to advise, and not when the pilot project's already started. So
Gotcha.
it'll be good to get the data and to help understand this quick timeline of trying to get this in by September to all the PSAPs, that there's a lot of information there operationally that I think creates some anxiety for the people actually having to use this. And I understand that they don't have to, but any state or county with data that they're not using is going to put themselves in a little bit of a challenge if they couldn't find somebody.
Yeah, agreed.
It's an argument for when we need to push the next-gen funding, you know, because you're correct. It's another login, it's another item for dispatchers to look at, potentially another, you know, point where an error could be made because they have to manually transfer it. So it's another good argument as we say, hey, we really need next-gen funded, so this can all be integrated, so we're not piecemealing it together. But for me, still, I think something we have to do in the interim, so.
And Budge, I think there's might be the appetite to hear from one or more of the pilot agencies once they get in, once they experience it, so that we can actually see what operationally, what was the experience and how valuable it is, because I just go back to that 50% stat. Sometimes it's, I'm losing seconds asking that question, and I know all our PSAPs have had that issue where the person on the other end doesn't know where they are. And you can ask as many questions as you can, and you will not get a location. And, you know, in that case, you're struggling to send help at all, you know, from that standpoint. But I think it probably would be valuable to get some firsthand feedback from those, you know, one or more of the pilot folks to hear, okay, how did it work? You know,
Right.
What was the process to give us a better feel?
So our next advisory board is May 15th, so we'll add that as an agenda item. We'll invite these pilot PSAPs to come and share their experience and answer questions from the board. The last thing we want to do is add operational complexity. We know that is a takeaway from this, and that's the biggest risk. Like I said, we're really good at providing the technology, and that's what we're doing. And we want to do it in a way that makes sense operationally for the PSAP community, and this is the beginning of that conversation. So I'm excited to see how the pilot goes and what we learn and how we can learn from this and how we can better integrate it. Yeah. All right, the next one, another topic of great debate among the PSAP community, GIS. So the goal of this project is for the state to be able to have a GIS data set that we can use to route 911 calls. Those of you who are very good at Microsoft Excel, if you're familiar with a VLOOKUP table, some of you probably know that command, that's what we have today. That's basically how we're routing 911 calls. It's a tabular data set, the phone number comes in, and you look up a static entry in essentially like an Excel file, and you pull that out, and then that is fed to the selective router, and you have a hardwired point-to-point connection to route that 911 call. That's how we do it today, which is why when you burn up all the transmission lines and shut down selective routers and all these kind of things, we can't quickly send those calls to a new location. NextGen solves that. In order to get to that point, we have to take all the data that's out there in our Annie and Allie database and convert it into this geo data set that we can route 911 calls on. That's what this project is. So again, we use the same software program, the SLP program, to select a vendor, went out to multiple bidders. And this one was a little unique. I had to find someone who was capable to run this software, but did not have a vested interest in working with all the PSAPs to do the detailed data correction, because I, as the state, couldn't enter into a contract and then subsequently enter into the same contract with a PSAP with the same vendors, so that I'm paying them to modify the data and somebody else is paying them to make the updates to send me the modifications. That would make this very complex from a procurement standpoint. So we had to find a capable vendor on this software as a license program that could do this solution for us. I think the contract was signed this morning. The company is DDTI, Digital Data Technologies Incorporated is the name of the software publisher. Again, they had 3 resellers. We picked the lowest one. They did this solution for the state of Massachusetts, Indiana. I think they worked in Alabama and a couple others. But they did not have a physical presence in California. So now, once they run these records through their software and they start to kick out those data records that need someone at the county or city level to make the changes, we can use the other GIS vendors that are in California to help us make those changes. So we've removed that procurement complexity from it. So the kickoff meeting for this happens on February 26th, which is next week. It's in Glendale. We have a GIS working group that's reporting up to the LRPC. A lot more data to come on this because, like I said, we're just about ready to have the kickoff. Essentially, we will make a request to get the Annie and Ally data from Frontier and AT&T. They'll feed it through this software tool, and it's going to convert it into this geo-encoded data set based on center line of the road. We'll deconflict all the PSAP boundaries statewide for the state of California. And then we have a record exceptions process as these records get kicked out. If they're simple, the software can solve them. If they're not, we need to reach out to the local GIS or the local 911 center and county coordinator to make those corrections. And so what we've done is we will provide a direct billing method. The PSAP can go out to the contracts that we already have in place to be able to hire someone to make those corrections, or they can use their own staff and we'll reimburse staff time. All that's included in this project. And so the goal is 12 months from now to have a working data set that we can use to route 911 calls in a next-gen 911 environment. And then our prime vendor in the RFP has the requirement to take that data set in and use it to build their emergency call routing function that they need to route 911 calls. That's what this project is about. There's a million pieces of detail associated with it. We could probably have a 10-hour conversation and still be asking questions. But with that, I'm going to see if you have any for me today.
Sure. You mentioned, I know.
You'll jump,
I know.
right?
You mentioned requesting the data from AT&T and Frontier. So is that's still to come? I mean, have you had discussions with them, or
So
how
we've
realistic is
reached
that
out
gonna be?
to both, and we've gotten fairly favorable responses from both. There are some details we have to work out. So we may need to come back to this board and ask for your help if we run into any barriers. But so far, the answer has been, yeah, we think so. We think we can do that. And so we're continuing those conversations. Obviously, it's data we pay for, we manage, to the tune of about... By a lot, to the tune of about $20 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
So, and other states have done this same thing. We have to work through and make sure we're in alignment with the PUC regulations regarding the data, which we are. And so we'll have to get back with you on that. Right now, like I said, the answer is, yeah, we think we can do that. But it's, you know, it's always in the details.
Thanks.
Okay, other questions on this one? And again, this is a complete breakout session at NENA. I'm not trying to plug NENA, but if anyone wants more information on that, reach out to us at the 911 office and we'll be happy to sit down with you. And I think that's it for me, unless you have any other questions from the 911 program.
Okay, any other questions from the board? Any questions from the audience? Okay, now we'll move on to the LRPC report from Mr. Herron.
I do think we have a couple things, but I mean, the good thing to report is that I think the LRPC and the State 911 Office are working so well together that Budge's report essentially covers a lot of the work that we're doing. As I mentioned, we had really good discussion on that location accuracy project that came out of the next-gen working groups that are reporting up to the LRPC. Actually, it was those initial discussions that the state had with those working groups, the next-gen working groups, that brought on the idea of, you know, we really need to have a GIS working group with not just the operational experts from the PSAPs, but we really need the GIS tech folks, you know, advising. And so, as Budge mentioned, that kickoff meeting is next week in Glendale, February 26th. The members of that working group have been identified. I was actually just going over it because we asked about the exact makeup of it, and Ryan was able to send that to me this morning. And we have a good cross-section, quite a large number, maybe a little larger than we initially thought, but in talking with them, that's to make sure that if we don't get everyone attending and traveling, that they still have a good amount of folks there to have the discussions. Alicia Fuller from CHP is our liaison, if you will, from the LRPC to that GIS working group. So we wanted to make sure we had a member of the LRPC at those meetings, and so she's going to do that. Only other thing to mention, again, Budge mentioned the NENA MCT quite a bit. That's coming up the second week of March. And in addition to all of the breakouts that the state is coordinating, we're also going to have an LRPC panel that is made up of Alicia, Leanne, and I, just to discuss the LRPC, the work we're doing, and how folks who are out there who are interested can get involved. And my final thing is just to make a note, National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week is April 14th to the 20th this year, so plan your celebrations. And that's it.
Any questions from the board for Mr. Herron? Any questions from the audience? Okay, the next 911 Advisory Board meeting will be scheduled for May 15th, followed by two, one in August and one in November. We do have one addition to the agenda, and that's the location accuracy with a request to one or more of the 4 demonstration sites to provide a report. Are there any other items that the board would like placed on the agenda?
On the legislative update, can we get the, Reggie talked about with the different Assembly bills and Senate bills, can we get that in our brief so that we can follow those and maybe a brief description on it so we have that in the future?
We will work with Mr. Salvador on that. Any other items that the board would like included on the agenda? Okay, next item up is a public comment. Is there any questions or comments from members of the audience? Going once, going twice. Hearing none, we'll have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
We have a second?
Second.
Do we need to roll call? Okay, any objection? We're adjourned.
Ooh, all over that.